we have a question about competition. It's actually a situation where there's two centers in one city, and devotees tell their guests, don't go to the other center. The other center tells their guests, don't go to that center. Sometimes there's a competition over territory, over money, even a competition over philosophies. In our group we believe this, your group believe that. And what causes it, how do we deal with it, and so forth. And when I hear these things, and these things are common, it's human nature, I always feel like the solution, although this may sound a little condescending, I don't mean it that way, but the solution is we need to grow up. We need to become more mature. And a lot of times I feel like as adults, we act more like children than adults. And actually, it's scientific. We don't mature as adults emotionally as we do physically. So although we may be an adult, we may not have matured emotionally as an adult. And unless we work on emotional maturity, we could stay emotionally more like children. And so when you see a lot of fighting and unhealthy competition, sometimes it's a result simply of immaturity. And of course, naturally, when we see this as devotees, we think, well, how can this exist in Krishna consciousness? And the answer is, it can't exist in Krishna consciousness, which then means there's an aspect of Krishna consciousness that's missing in this exchange or in this relationship. So competition and quarreling is quite common because we see that amongst husband and wife, and they're supposed to love one another. When we quarrel and argue with devotees, there was no contract to love one another. So it's quite natural and quite common. But we're going to have to rise above it if we're going to have a movement that's going to do something of significance. And I think one of the significant things is that if we want to attract people to our movement and they see that we can't even get along, then who would want to be part of such a movement? It just you're talking about love and peace and so forth. And then I see amongst yourselves you can't even agree on simple things, and you're speaking ill of another devotee or of another project, or speaking ill of another guru because that guru preaches differently than your guru. My guru is better than your guru is wrong. This is all very immature. Now, some devotees would call this a very kanishta. A third-class devotee would think this way, make these kinds of distinctions. Because kanishta adhikari has respect for his godbrothers and has respect for his seniors. So he wouldn't deal with people in that way. So that's something to think about. If I think only my guru is the right one, only these devotees are right, these devotees are wrong, it could be due to kanishta. It could also be true. It could be that these devotees are wrong. That's another thing. That's a philosophical thing. But I'm speaking in general. When they're not actually wrong, they're just different. And we think they're wrong. So is different wrong? No, not necessarily. It's just different. And with a broader vision, we understand different is good because they're different people, and different people will be attracted to different gurus and different methods of preaching and so forth. So that's good. But we don't want to force people. We want people to make their own decisions, and we want to have a more mature way of dealing with one another, a way in which we're willing to make some compromises. The fact is that in order for people to get along who disagree, and obviously as individuals we're going to disagree on certain things, some compromises will need to be made. I don't agree with you, you don't agree with me. So what can we agree on? And what can I accept on your side? What can you accept on my side that I can't budge with and you can't budge with? So we can say, okay, I accept, if you can't budge on this and I can't budge on that, you accept me. And then we say, but I can budge, I can compromise in these areas. And so then we come to some agreement. That's just a mature way of dealing with one another. And I think what's really sad is if we find organizations, and you may think there are no such organizations, but there are. If we find organizations who have learned how to work in a more synergistic and cooperative way than even devotees, that is, to me, it's a big travesty. It's depressing. It's wrong. And it's a sign that there's something wrong. And I think part of what may be wrong, and we discussed this before, is we think that by being devotees, automatically we will do everything well, because a devotee is an expert. Yeah, a pure devotee is an expert, so we will do everything well when we're pure devotees. Until we're pure devotees, don't assume that you're going to do everything well. That you may have to learn how to do it well. And don't assume just because you're chanting Hare Krishna 16 rounds every day, everything you say is true and everything you do is right. It may not be. And I think that's where we run into problems. Religious people can get very self-righteous. And the sad thing is, and the unfortunate thing is, the more Krishna conscious you are, and this sounds strange because you would think the more Krishna conscious you are, the more humble you would be. But in that interim period, in when haven't become humble enough, you can see that as you become more Krishna conscious, you can become more self-righteous in the sense of thinking yourself better. And why better? Because I chant 32 rounds, you chant 16. I know I've read Prabhupada's books 15 times, you've only read them once. That makes me better. And that means that I'm always right and you're always wrong, which obviously is not true. In the corporate world, I've read a little bit, I'm not part of that, but I've read a little bit about it, and I've been told that huge problem you have, and you can see this in our movement, is if you're senior, you think you know everything. And if you're junior, the senior thinks you don't know anything. But the junior thinks the senior's out of touch because he doesn't know what's going on in the world. So you have this dynamic going on. And so why should we be not affected by that dynamic? Why should we not be affected by the dynamics of relationships? We are. And so even though I'm chanting good rounds, I'm still affected by these realities. I was in a communist country, a couple of years ago, and I could see all the senior leaders were very much in that dictatorial mood. I'm the senior, you do what I say. Whereas all the junior people, they grew up in a different culture. They grew up in a democracy. And in democracy, it's more about group decision. So these are realities that we have to learn how to navigate. And you can chant 150 rounds and still you may not know how to navigate those things. So we just have to observe the reality. If we're not getting along, observe it, admit it, we're not, there's something wrong. It's to take responsibility, it's a defect on my part, and I should do something about it. And not just think, well, because I'm chanting, I must be right. How humble is that? Hare Krishna.